Hello one and all, this is a YouTube video about USA 250, America 250, happening this year. So, it is of course 250 years since the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and the way I'm going to go about it is through this book here, which for me, as someone who's really interested in history, is the best way to really understand or to find something meaningful beyond one's immediate society, as it were, in neighborhood, city, village and town, etc. But how did we get here, and what legacy has been left to America over the last 250 years? I've had a look at two other books about American history. The Paul Johnson one, called whatever it is, and then the Oxford Short History of the World series and the volume about America. But this, by Jeremy Black, who is a Professor Emeritus from the United Kingdom, is the best of the three. It's definitely my pick for one of the best books that I actually even come across. I give this sort of kind of, I don't know, I can't quite give it a sort of a perfect 6, but it's not quite 10 out of 10, but I don't know, it should be 9.5, I should imagine. It's so good, it's just so good that it should be not just recommended, but probably something more, if that's really, if the Statue of Liberty would allow such a thing, which of course it wouldn't, and neither would Magna Carta. But anyway, the first thing, having read it through, that I would sort of take away from this book, the immediate and overall takeaway is that any kind of realistic reckoning of America might be done, or might be broken down into a few major themes. And those themes are as follows. There is North and South. There is race and Reconstruction. There is expansion and Native Americans. There is also federal versus states, not to be underestimated. There is rural and urban. Yeah. And there is, surprise, surprise, government and or high society and the common people. There is democracy and free market economics. This last is generally good, and the rest is generally quite bad, if not very bad. Yeah. And as usual in history, it all happens all at the same time. So, my more detailed thoughts and notes that I've kind of taken about this book are as follows. The Latin American countries of the period had a similar constitution to America, and Britain didn't have authoritarianism and or dictatorship either, but had a somewhat different constitution, and most famously an unwritten constitution, and also kings, and also a little, very infinitesimally minor aristocracy. But either way, still nothing like authoritarianism, and certainly not dictatorship. Well, that is an arresting point to start with. I mean, they do talk of American exceptionalism, and that is, something like a bit of an exception, evidently. Although, of course, naturally enough, twinned somewhat with England. But it kind of points towards the kind of vanishing point at the end of the road, in my understanding of history generally, in that, how on earth does that actually come about? I mean, if America has pretty well the same kind of constitution as a group of other countries not too far away in the general hemisphere of planet Earth, then it's not necessarily the Constitution, evidently, that's so wondrous and so incredible, but it's the application of that Constitution by a culture. Jefferson, certainly in this book, appears generally quite bad, if I can sort of sum it up like that. He discouraged a diplomatic service. This is a short book. It's only 280 pages or so. So more specialised works will uncover exactly why he chose such a bewildering course of policy. Apparently the American diplomatic service remained basically amateurish until at least the 1940s. So, perhaps that explains certain things, including Suez and the like. Jefferson also, that I acquired from other books, interestingly enough, he abolished the First Bank of the United States, which in my understanding may be understood as a direct cause of the first Wall Street crash. He was Anglophobic, amazingly enough. He politicised an anti-aristocratic discourse, and yet the aristocratic influence pervades American government, while democracy remains the ethos of the common people. And it would appear as if that is the thing that people pick up on from Americans today in America and from Americans here in England. And not an uncommon thing in my general guesstimation of the thing. At the same time as that, what I just said previous, the Whigs, the Whig grouping in America, were also anti-imperialist. So, of course, that doesn't just apply to European countries, but it does it applies to America itself. So, when we think of America and imperialism, we're not just thinking the war against Spain and the taking over of the Philippines, for example, but we are talking the expansion west. So, otherwise known as manifest destiny, amazingly enough. Okay, so in 1800, the Federalist faction lost the general election of that year, and consequently there remained only a partially centralised state going through the 19th century. Another fantastic difference between, America and Europe, up to a point. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 was to do with whether or not slavery might be legal or illegal, and what it stipulated was that it should be left to the people of these states to decide for themselves. I picked out a little line from this book. Both sides in the argument, quote, terrorized each other in order to try and win a majority for their views. Right. Okay. So, it's kind of out west. It's a bit more like the Wild West. 1854 in Nebraska is a bit more Wild West. So obviously that implies not so much in the way of a well-established or any kind of established criminal justice system and the like. There might be one or two sheriffs who might run into Hollywood actors with various opinions about things, if you know what I mean. But anyway, moderation had very few powerful exponents in 1860 anywhere in America. And for me, that's just a fantastic thing to have said. I mean, that, to understand American history and to understand any history, how can that possibly be the case? I mean, if we suppose that that's the sort of thing that has sort of emerged over the 21st century in America and elsewhere. The whole kind of ratcheting up of rhetoric in the press, the whole ratcheting up of the political life of political parties and political movements, the juvenile name calling, back and forth probably. You're nuts. No, you're nuts. Using the terminology of the day, and so on and so forth, as well as the latest iterations. But what that actually adds up to, when what he says, what Jeremy Black says, is that because moderation had only few powerful exponents, that meant that the national parties became ineffective, and democracy failed to find a consensus. So that seems to me to be fantastically profound. And, well, for all us democratic people and are from democratic countries, it's more than just, and it ought to be more than just a light bulb moment. The sheer, he talks about, I'm going to be quoting bits and pieces of sentences for less than a minute. The sheer unremitting violence of the South against Republican authority after 1865, against their governors and, of course, black Americans, culminated in the disputed returns of the 1876 elections for president in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. And a compromise was somehow thrashed out, ultimately, whereby the Republican president, or the Republican candidate for president, would become president, but that in return, basically the northern federal military units would be withdrawn from at least those three southern states. And that kind of apparently seems to bring an end to the initial phase of a hopeful Reconstruction period after the Civil War. So there is a book by a bloke called Eric Foner that is fairly extensive, but and is only about that period, 1865 to 1877. But as I understand it, it might just be, and I'm only guessing really from some Amazon reviews at the Amazon page, obviously. It sort of kind of seems like it's a bit of a sort of a narrative history, as in kind of like a piece of social engineering, what you perhaps might call a means to an end narrative, rather than a real narrative, shall we say. Yeah, fantastic. Well, maybe the British are just too honest, and that's why they have had problems politically since the war. Or maybe, again, with history. I mean, people do, I've said this before, people do seem to take history somewhat for granted. And once you get even beyond the weeds, it does begin to look potentially tremendously complicated. And it really does need a kind of more than just a forensic mind to really sort of work through how it's all happening. And I don't know, I think if this book by Professor Jeremy Black seems to be something like that. It's all so accessible, so readable, and very, what is it called? Robert Gildea, no less, calls him a master of his craft. Yeah, just to kind of pick out the interesting bits from, there's a little kind of paragraph on the back. It says, discover the shaping forces of American identity, the journey, the conflicts that fractured and made a nation. This book captures the essence of America's evolution, a land of dreams, divisions, power and progress. By the 1890s, the whole reconciliation project is sort of enters sort of like a new phase, where the North basically gives way to Southern views in order to force a true or a better reconciliation to actually occur. So, of course, that marginalises Black America, alas. This kind of results in the 1898 new Constitution for Louisiana. After the Civil War, there was a hope. Wait a minute, yeah. And then I picked out this. This is another Jeremy Black special. After the Civil War, there was a hope that Southerners would adopt Northern values. Yeah. But alas, it was not the case. It's my little add-on to it. It was not the case, apparently. So that, how that happens and how that plays out, or at least some idea of how that plays out, is in this book, and it is remarkable. Yeah, remarkable. And then again, this word, not just sectionalism, but regionalism. Further regionalism included some for and some against the gold standard. So there we're really into the weeds of politics and regionalism. So so farmers in the Midwest, I think, are they against the gold standard? I'd have to double check. I made a little note of it. But there we are. There's other. History books can be full of little details like this, like that. But what does it all add up to? How is it actually meaningful in the kind of the forward motion of history? And talking of forward motions of history, at least several times he kind of stops and has a sort of a little. Has a little mull. He sort of mulls over the possibility. What would happen if that hadn't have happened? Well, things would have been a bit different. Like, for instance, if America had taken over Canada, when they tried, they invaded Canada about 4 times and were thrown out by the British 4 times. But if they'd been successful, what difference would that have made? And he kind of says, well, the Canadas might have allied with the North more so, and therefore that would have created even more preponderance of kind of northern values over southern values, and perhaps that would have kind of tilted the whole thing enough for different things to have happened. But moving forward, we're still in the 1890s. Again, this is a tremendously interesting stuff. He talks about how there was criticism of the Gilded Age, which encouraged the development of progressive activism, and all of that kind of anchored their ideas in the safe harbour of democratic ideals. And then he says that it was Theodore Roosevelt, that guy just there, oddly enough, who defined the whole progressive era. And then the 1920s arrive, and America experiences a reaction against all the change that had been happening. And prohibition is part of this reaction. So then he just gives it to us. You can't just sort of pick out sentences and say, I know all about it now. That's definitely one thing. But there was a kind of anti-radical nature to America from the 20s until about the 1960s. So, during that period, left-wing solutions were considered un-American. And there was, this is a kind of, this whole thing had was prominent, or preeminent, shall we say. Preeminent, yeah. Progressives were marginalised during this time. Left-wing solutions were un-American. And McCarthyism was quite wide-ranging, in fact, and it kind of sort of defined public culture at government and popular levels. The culture wars of today are apparently framed in competing images of the 50s and 60s. But yeah, that's what I've kind of picked out as some ridiculously interesting things that I mean, I haven't just been fast forwarded in my understanding of America. For me, I've sort of kind of caught a lift with a comet, an emoji comet or something. Probably over there. I don't know. Yeah. There has been and is American class privilege. That's one of the things that comes out from this text. There's also an oligarchic tendency in United States politics, and that America is truer to its 18th century origins than perhaps some suppose it might have been or might be. The electorate, the American electorate, is not overly doctrinaire. Generally, America is a genuine nation of immigrants, that it is assertive and restless, and that there is both exhilaration and disappointment in freedom, and that one of the major values of history is perspective. And he himself finishes his book with a similar phrase that's better than mine. Was it ever thus? How about that? I mean, one of the major values of history is perspective. Was it ever thus? Yep. 9.5 stars out of 10, definitely. Fantastic book. Absolutely loved it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Got loads of pages of notes. Don't know how many. 1, 2... I've filled up pages all over the place. Yeah. 4 or 5 pages of notes that sort of look like that. All these. They're page references, and I've written a little something or other. Great stuff. Unbelievably good. Yeah. So I don't know whether you are an aficionado or an expert on American politics, American history. Then I don't know. Maybe this might be a challenging and interesting book. I would be very interested to see what Americans who have read history make of it. For sure, not just compared to the history that Americans, you guys, or whoever, the ones that are out there that have learned at school, but obviously you're reading Historathon and that kind of thing. But also, Europeans, the Anglosphere, and England, of course. So yeah, I mean, I so recommend this book for anyone. It's a one-stop shop, as they say, for USA 250. I don't think you can go wrong with Jeremy Black in this kind of form. Yeah, this is top line history, in my opinion. So yeah, if I'm wrong, and if anyone's got any opinions about anything that I've said, or would like to add anything to anything I've said from the wealth of knowledge that is out there, then please don't hesitate to say something in the comments. I mean, you probably won't. But anyway, yeah. Jeremy Black, A Brief History of America. USA 250. Down with the British. Up the Patriots. And, bye for now.